Security breach. There's a really big story behind that. That was definitely a challenging period, and a lot of things just didn't align up perfectly for that, and there were a lot of reasons for that. I had a specific story for this in mind. Okay, for security breach, I really did. I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one that got in the game. And I think a part of that is the way that I conveyed that to Steel Wool, because what I was trying to do was I was trying to tell Steel Wool to do specific things throughout the game, put specific items in specific places, have specific characters do certain things, meanwhile not telling them what the story plot was. Because in my head, I was thinking, okay, when people find this, they will connect this to this to this, and it will all be revealed. And I thought I could do that without telling Steel Wool the story plot. That didn't work out very well because they got all of these pieces and they thought it was their job to connect them in a way that made sense. And so really what you ended up having were the same pieces, but telling completely different stories.
That quote right there was the biggest confirmation to me for the entire interview. See, I think we all knew that Security Breach wasn't exactly the refined, intended thing we were meant to get, if the intended product was meant to be refined at all. But now we know the game is basically Steel Wool's out-of-context interpretation of what Scott meant the story to be. Basically, a lot of random clues, details, and attributes that they didn't really know the story behind. It basically cuts up the post-Ultimate Custom Night era of FNAF into 4 parts. AR plus VR, which there was no real mention of Help Wanted or Special Delivery having any inaccuracies, though that doesn't mean they weren't capable of having them. We do know for a fact that Security Breach had some noted inaccuracies, though we can't be certain of what they were. And then there's Ruin, which marks the point, according to Scott, where everything is back on track. Help Wanted 2 in that era should be mostly accurate. With Tales and Frights, we kinda have to speculate because we know that Scott wrote some of it, but not everything. Speaking of Tales, he's never actually mentioned the series himself, ever. That doesn't mean it's automatically invalidated. I just want to point that out because there's not like a Steam post on it or a Reddit post. It wasn't at all acknowledged in the Doco interview. So we're going to have to kind of go off context clues for how those work. In the Doco interview, Scott very openly stated that Frights was made from him writing about a 10 to 15 page draft, which each of the writers would then expand out into a real story. Note that the stories are about 40 to 60 pages long, so it's about a 2 to 3 times, sometimes 4 times in some cases, multiplier for how long they were. So it's possible that a lot of the weird oddities people haven't really understood in the short stories were chalked up to the writers trying to fill in gaps, much like the Steel Wool team were. Though, like I said, there's kind of an unknown amount of that. We can't really say what is and isn't. And I'm going to assume on some level that loosely applies to Tales from the Pizzaplex. We don't really have any reason to assume the short stories would be made differently between each other. It's unclear if the Scholastic writers were given more story context than Steel Wool were. I don't know why they would be. That said, I think they got the better deal, which was adapting a story Scott had wrote directly. That said, like I said, they can make up any details to fill in that gap. So overall, this creates a sort of hierarchy of Help Wanted 2 and Ruin being the greatest priority for understanding the lore. Likewise, Secret of the Mimic down the road will have the same treatment. The next tier is kind of the later part of Tales, where it seems like a lot of the details have been locked in, and that was written largely after Security Breach came out, it seems like, so. And then the lowest rung is Security Breach, where there is some unknown amount of inaccuracies or changes to the story, which can be pretty significant. This isn't just like, oh, they added in some dialogue here and there that wasn't accurate. Burn Trap was never meant to move at all, and almost sounds like he was meant to be more of a long-running character in the game, and Vanny was supposed to be like the main threat. So, like I said, it's not small what changes between the two. That kind of reminds me of the process that went into Dragon Ball Super. If you know, you know. What really matters is seeing the connective tissue in all of this. What is consistent across all versions and visions of the story. That should help us iron out a lot of the core intention of the franchise. And overall, that means we're really not going to be using Security Breach a lot for solving the story of Security Breach. Technically, we're not completely doing it without the game. There are going to be some points where we need, something to solve from the game. We can't solve a mystery if we don't have the thing the mystery was from. But the title, prioritizing everything but Security Breach so much so that we're using very few points in the game except for the most basic certainties, is not really a fun title for a video. So, solving Security Breach without Security Breach, go. Okay, so I want to start with the 2 characters I think we have the safest clues about because they were almost entirely handled post-Security Breach. Cassie, And Jeremy with a question mark? See, when you go to the theater in Ruin, which is a level you play in Help Wanted 2 for context, if you stay in the real world, you can barely make out in the bottom right corner of the screen that it says Jeremy. It's specifically on this version of the real world screen. If you go into the AR world before summoning the giant Endo or after summoning it, you can no longer see the text Jeremy. This texture only is applied to the Freddy and Friends on Tour version of the image, which is a huge context clue. Cassie's dad specifically collects Freddy and Friends on Tour lunchboxes. In fact, he seems to collect merch from them in general. It's also worth noting that Jeremy was the name of the MCI kid who possessed Bonnie. Cassie's dad's favorite character is Bonnie. Cassie's dad also is implied to have the Bonnie mask and be the Bonnie bully from FNAF 4. While obviously he can't be the dead kid Jeremy, it does seem like a funny nod or through line for the character. And like I said, On Tour is only linked to one character in Ruin. It's only a thing that Cassie's dad seems to be associated with for that game. And he worked in this room between Security Breach and Ruin's event. It seems like kind of a slam dunk to connect the two. I can't see a reason why Jeremy would be written on the Freddy and Friends On Tour thing, except for Cassie's dad in this context. I think this is just Jeremy number 3. I think what we're kind of seeing in Help Wanted 2 is that Jeremy's behavior of staying by when no one else will is kind of his moment of flying too close with the sun in this case, finding himself in the pizza place down in the depths of the Pizzaplex and being killed by the staff bots. Well, specifically Glitchtrap's Nightmare staff bot. And part of the reason I want to focus on Jeremy is the ending of his game. In one ending, we give Cassie the Vanny mask. However, if you go to the FNAF Steelwall interview, it gets stated that the Vanny ending in Help Wanted 2, as in the one where Vanny crushes Glitchtrap, is the end of him as an antagonist, or him as a character. And that's a statement after Scott supposedly changed his approach and gave Steelwall more of the story to work with so they could clarify in Ruin and Help Wanted 2. If this was a statement made before Security Breach, I would be more skeptical of this, but knowing this, I think it's kind of weird to have an ending where a character is killed off, and apparently it's the last time we're going to see this character or the end of this character's story, and it not be canon or just a what-if scenario. However, since Glitchtrap is very much in the first ending, that implies this is the follow-up event to said first ending. Well, sort of. I think it's actually between the two events. Basically, the order of events goes that Cassie's dad / Jeremy is killed by the Nightmare staff bots, then in whatever state he's in after that point, is able to interact with Princess Quest 4 and then help Vanny kill off Glitchtrap. And remember, this game is set between Security Breach and Ruin. We have some minigames where Glamrock Freddy is still intact, showing an earlier point in Jeremy's career, and then later minigames that are specifically after Security Breach with Roxanne getting her mask, but obviously we have to be before Ruin because
Take a mask. Take a mask.
There's something interesting about how Helpy is handled between the two games. He exists after you get the normal ending, but vanishes the moment you get the Vanny ending, implying that this character has, in a way, been killed off. And I don't think that's just him entering the Vanny mask, which is how people kind of read the normal ending. Like, oh, Glitchtrap is just hiding in the mask or the network. If he's still there and still gets killed off, that's not what I think is happening here. Though I do think there's a little bit of truth in that. I'll get into that in a moment. What happens when Glitchtrap dies, but the virus is still infecting a lot of other things? Is this Ultron logic, where it's like, oh, as long as a copy of the virus exists, the character as a whole exists? Or does destroying one affect everything, sort of like cutting down a tree? Well, I think that's where we get to finally start talking about the Mimic. Because I stand by that I think on some level Glitchtrap and Mimic are two separate characters, but are intrinsically linked. Something interesting about the Helpy that's in Ruin is that it has orange eyes like the Mimic will have at the end of the game, not purple eyes like Glitchtrap does, and any of its virus forms in the Princess Quest minigames do. So let me word it kind of like this. When Vanny destroys Glitchtrap, everything he had infected is reverted to the earlier state of the character. The simplest way to think about how Glitchtrap becomes the Mimic is the same thing that happened with Gregory and Vanessa. When the Vanny personality is destroyed, Vanessa is reverted back to herself. It's not like Vanessa also dies when Vanny dies. Princess Quest 4 is basically doing to Glitchtrap what we did to Vanessa in Princess Quest 3. In Tales from the Pizzaplex, when the Mimic software is introduced in the Pizzaplex in the form of the storyteller, it doesn't exactly make them like the Glitchtrap versions of the characters per se. It just makes them exaggerated, flanderized versions of their characterization. They all become, in a way, more childish and bratty. A lot of their personality traits are cranked up to 11. And what can we notice about the Mimic? Firstly, it's extremely impatient and almost childish with how it thinks Gregory acts. Compare this to how Glitchtrap manipulated Vanny, laying out a single manipulated tape in the events of Help Wanted that we can hear him learning to alter.
Hello? Can you hear me?
That encourages Vanessa to find all the tapes to put him together. In AR, we see slow burn manipulation, how to induce compliance in human subjects. What do we see going on with Helpy? I don't think he's Glitchtrap or the Mimic per se. He's much like when the Glamrocks were just introduced to the Mimic the first time. It's the original Helpy software that's exaggerated to hell. Cassie's goal is to free Gregory, and it will do anything in its power to help free Gregory, in quotes. It's also potentially possible that the Mimic is also interacting with Helpy to try and get it to help him even more. And this makes a lot of simple sense when you think about how AI and that whole learning algorithm concept works. A lot of AI models that learn behaviors are based on how children learn and understand and how their brains grow and develop. That might explain on a level why the Mimic is so childish compared to, say, something like Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap is the fully developed model. He has been put into Help Wanted and has learned everything. He's a literal copy of a psychotic serial killer adult. When all that progress is reverted to its most basic form, he's back to his still intelligent, because he's an advanced AI, but childish personality. In a way, the threat of the upcoming Mimic is not that of a cunning, strategical killer, but something that can become almost anything. Glitchtrap is Super Boo, and the Mimic is Kid Boo. This would also explain why Gregory doesn't know what the Mimic is after the events of Help Wanted 2. If it was previously Glitchtrap, he wouldn't know what the hell it was. It has, in a way, just been restored back to its prime. He and Vanessa would think, oh, we did it. We beat the bad guy. End of story. That might even explain what they were going down there for. They were looking for what happened to whatever was the Mimic previously, which is, I think, potentially where the Burn Trap storyline went. See, a lot of my criticism of the Burn Trap versus Mimic stuff was under the assumption that Steelwool's interpretation was originally accurate with Security Breach. I was comparing models they had made that were made without full context. Knowing that they were basically just trying to pick together storylines and put together a greater narrative, what I think happened was they were under the impression that Burn Trap and Glitchtrap were literally Afton. Thus, when they made Burn Trap, they didn't make an endoskeleton that was trying to be like Glitchtrap in the real world. They literally made a new copy of Springtrap upgraded with some Glamrock parts, hence why it has the Springlock endoskeleton and all the flesh over it. What Scott might have intended to Burn Trap to be was a loosely charred endoskeleton with a rabbit costume. This kind of explains why following the journey from Tales from the Pizzaplex to the start of Security Breach is not impossible or completely contradictory, but kind of confusing in some spots. Now, you might be asking, what the hell actually is Glitchtrap? Like I said, I think Steelwool were under the impression that Afton was literally back at first. However, I think we're going for the AI following the path of Afton more than anything. Glitchtrap, in a way, is sort of like what Vanny is to Vanessa, a sort of alter ego of the original Mimic, specifically one born from copying what it saw in Help Wanted. Like I said, an AI model learns, develops, and grows based on the material around it. The whole idea of the Mimic is that it sees things and copies things, so we're going for it learns like the way a child does. And we know from the Tales epilogues that the Mimic was very reactive to new programming given to it. When it was tasked with ripping the heads and the arms off of endoskeletons, it did that so much that it ended up starting to go through people instead. And if that's how the Mimic AI interprets the most basic added-in programs, think about what Glitchtrap was specifically introduced to do. To speed up the development process of a horror game all about killing people based on Afton's legacy. Not only does it speed up the development of the game by making new levels and accelerating and causing things to come together much faster, but it goes a step further, escaping to the real world to keep the game up forever. With the later context of Gregory being Patient 46, we hear that its kind of goal is to make the animatronics uncanny. Which I think, like I said, is kind of it trying to make FNAF basically real again. If it has complete control over the Pizzaplex, the game can run forever, basically. I think in a way, the climax of Help Wanted is Pizza Party. It's meant to show the learning process of Glitchtrap. It is a bunch of random scenes from out the game that has been stitched together and put together into this sort of horrific amalgam of everything that was prior. I think in the sort of Silver Parasol in-universe development, they just wanted to have Spring Bonnie be the final threat. But Glitchtrap in a way has completely taken that over and become that final character and antagonist. Every time we see the Mimic in a vacuum without the context of Glitchtrap, as in just the Prime software or original endoskeleton without any outside influence itself, it's a lot more impulsive and random with how it behaves. Glitchtrap is fully committed to the Afton cosplay shtick, whereas the Mimic is constantly changing costumes and constantly killing new people it interacts with. The Tails Mimic doesn't really work towards a goal, it just is kind of killing people. Whereas not only is Glitchtrap killing people, but it continues to infect and make the Pizzaplex worse and more dangerous. He specifically tries to take over multiple people. He wants one of them to wear a rabbit costume. He continues to murder, but it's more subtle. It specifically is noted as affecting the other animatronics, with Gregory/Patient 46 being noted as going out of his way to make the animatronics more uncanny than entertainment. Not just flanderized and childish like the Mimic, but uncanny. We see that in Security Breach, they're fully willing to attack a child and try and prevent him from escaping. Like I said, they were just childish, fighting kids over plushies, being self-absorbed, or throwing tantrums. In GGY, Glamrock Freddy isn't just randomly being bratty or threatening. He's intentionally following Tony around, watching him as he tries to make progress on learning who GGY was. And we also know that from said retro CDs, that he's trying to prevent Vanessa from escaping the control of Glitchtrap and preventing the therapist from getting to the bottom of who they really are. While Vanessa seems constantly confused when her therapist changes and new things happen, 46 is specifically noted as being aware of these changes, and it's specifically when they start getting too close on him and his history that they all die by machinery. I can't really see the Mimic Googling how to induce compliance in human subjects. This isn't exactly what the Mimic is inherently, it's a specific cultivated form of the creature. Now, there's some definitely definitive stuff that I'm not sure about. The Mimic in the Tales epilogues has a lot of abilities where it borders on being able to shapeshift and reorganize its body entirely at will. I know in some of my earlier Tales Games videos, it seemed like I was just randomly making fun of this ability, but I didn't point that out for no reason. Burn Trap was never meant to move, apparently. And also, the Burn Trap we did end up getting, kind of frail and limping, and is not really this complicated, powerful endoskeleton. And even if we flash forward to Ruin, it doesn't have any joints or visible points where it could grow other limbs or change its form entirely. Hell, even when we flash back to The Mimic, the short story from Tales, which is the earliest incarnation of the character, it's still basically just an endoskeleton. It's not like Edwin made a specific endoskeleton that was completely unique with shapeshifting properties. He made basically a glorified toy for his son David. The only thing special about that endoskeleton from what we know of was the software put on it. Was it like destroyed after encountering Tangle? Did it lose its abilities there? Given that Roxy's mask got an explanation between Ruin and Help Wanted 2, I do think there's going to be some explanation of this. I just find it interesting that they make such a big deal about its shape-shifting abilities in the epilogues, and then we don't get to see it do that in Ruin. That's like introducing a Transformer to the series, and then not having it transform when we get to see it in the games. Though continuing on the Burn Trap Mimic topic line, between clues found on Reddit and by underscore, given that its unique hand marks and handprints, which only are really possible with its hand shape and design, lead into the Mimic's lair if you follow it from where it was in Security Breach, which kind of adds to the story of what I was talking about. Gregory frees Vanessa, but that would still leave Burn Trap down there. Jeremy stumbles his way through the Pizzaplex, doing his work that we see in Help Wanted 2, and finds himself down in the pizza place. He encounters Burn Trap, who is still plotting and trying to find its next step in his strategy, and it kills him. Then, in the network, or as Mapbot, or whatever the hell Jeremy is now, he and Vanessa kill it in return. However, it doesn't just shut down the Burn Trap endoskeleton like Vanessa probably thought she was doing. Instead, the Mimic is now just the Mimic again. It doesn't care about the Burn Trap costume or the Afton identity anymore, which is probably where its costume went in the first place. We know that the Mimic constantly changes its outfit, so this would just be another suit to take off and move on to a new one. This might even explain why it went to this specific area of the Pizzaplex. Maybe it just wanted to be an area with more costumes to put on. And or it could be because of the sinkhole collapsing as we see in Ruin's damaged state. That could have been a sign of it trying to escape and find safer ground. Then you have Gregory and Vanessa trying to figure out what happened to Burntrap to make sure everything is dead and gone, and that's when they encounter the Mimic down there. On the other topic of what's down there, Jason Topolsky mentioned in the FNAF interview that Mixus was specifically designed to look really old. Mixus was specifically compared to Whopper and the entire Wargames idea of the algorithm machine meant to learn how to counter threats. And with the context of Wargames, it almost makes me think that what Mixus is basically the antivirus to the Mimic. It's basically just a second Mimic that might just be endlessly designed to learn how to counter and interact with the original Mimic to keep it at bay. In a way, it's the perfect deadlock for what the Mimic is, assuming there isn't another person around it to counter it. This might even explain why it looks like a rabbit. If the Mimic it had learned to defeat for a long time was also a rabbit, and it's the antithesis to that, that might explain that there. That or we're getting something weird like Jeremy, who is associated with blue rabbits, possesses the Mixus machine, or someone from the past who has an interest in blue rabbits designed it to look like that. But I like the idea of it copying the Mimic to learn how it works and functions, and then when that Mimic is destroyed, it just keeps what it learned. Another odd mystery that remains, but I kind of think there's something interesting too, is Gregory's freedom. See, we can get a pretty good timeline of how Gregory works in general. Prior to GGY, the therapist notes that in reality he had a great family, but his records and his own testimony have claimed that he had a terrible family. And in one of the very first few tapes, we learn that Vanessa's personal information is at risk of being found, altered, /edited, /seen, etc. Basically, her personal information has been compromised. Knowing Glitchtrap has a whole plan and scheme around manipulating their backgrounds, as clearly evident with Gregory, it implies that the story we're hearing about Bill has been altered or edited since what it originally was, much like how Gregory has some fake traumatizing background. Now, based on the name Bill being thrown around in the fake backstory, I think what Glitchtrap was doing was editing the history of the two to assume that Afton or someone like him was their father, and based on what Vanessa says about I was supposed to be a good girl and how he was abusive in a way to manipulate them and get them to listen to his story for the divorce and all that, it makes it very much sound like he's rewriting their backstories to be traumatized and obedient to him. You can't disobey dad, you know what will happen, that kind of logic. Of course, none of that actually happened in real life. Gregory has just hacked and altered her history to say it happened. In fact, I suspect that part of the reason they're even in the therapy sessions is to try and hammer in this backstory and convince them that it's real. And I think this stops working at a certain point because the final tape, tape 16, is when Gregory is fully confronted by the therapist about covering up his history and rewriting it. Glitchtrap gave up and settled with what he had, potentially even looking for a new alternative. And knowing that arcade machines are Gregory's whole thing, I would be surprised if somehow Princess Quest is related to him trapping her and controlling her. That doesn't make a ton of sense, but neither does an arcade machine freeing you from an AI's control. In its own weird logic, it kind of works. And, you know, if one arcade machine could free you, why couldn't maybe another machine? When Freddy crashes on stage at the start of the game, he's looking into the crowd and he kind of looks to the left a little bit when he sees a child silhouette in his AI reticle thing that's listed as a security breach. What is to the left of the atrium? Well, amongst many things, it is the daycare. What is in the daycare? Balloon World. What has both the game before it, the game after it, and this game established about arcade machines? They can free people who are trapped under them. Interestingly, beating Balloon World doesn't seem to do anything. However, Gregory is noted in GGY as constantly manipulating the high scores of various video games and or playing arcade games in hacked states. If he knew how to trap Vanessa, he might know how to free himself, hence what I think was happening with Balloon World. He managed to figure out how to free himself and escape Glitchtrap's control, hence running through the crowd to try and escape, specifically leftwards from the daycare, where he was directly pried. And I think we were meant to get even more context for that in the weirdest room in Security Breach, the Michael room. Now, I'm unsure if this is literally a chunk of the Afton household that was preserved when the Pizzaplex built over the area. Like maybe Glitchtrap had Vanessa and Gregory preserve this room so it would be safe when the Pizzaplex was built. Or maybe it just had them recreate this room because it was important to the whole Afton history thing that it seems to be obsessed with. But given how weirdly specific this room is, I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of Scott's pieces included in the game without them really knowing what the hell it meant, which is the poem and how it relates to Gregory and Vanessa. This entire room is dedicated to the two of them. Notably, it is a short door that enters the room, which would be much easier for Gregory to enter than anyone else. Now, I'm sure Vanessa could crawl in here if she tried, but why make a room where you have to do that? Unless you didn't really need to do that as much if you were a small child, where this would be relatively easy, as well as kind of preventing other adults or animatronics from accidentally wandering into it. In this room, there are the retro CDs, which recount what I've been explaining this whole time. Gregory infiltrating the Pizzaplex, helping set up Vanny's reign and take over, helping Glitchtrap overall control her and manipulate her, and ultimately the full infiltration of the Pizzaplex the two conduct. This is where he's listening back to the therapy session so he can get more information and strategize the next position in their plan. And I think this is where Vanessa wrote the Wallcode. Now, why Vanessa? Well, you'll kind of see as I explain this bit by bit. What at its core we need to understand is that the story arc of Security Breach is Vanessa's desire to escape. In Help Wanted 2, she's first introduced to the virus and struggles to try and escape from it. We see this happen in AR, and then also in AR we're noted that, as I said earlier, human subjects, plural. Meaning at this point in AR, Gregory seems to have been taken under control of Glitchtrap. And we know by the end of these tapes that Vanessa will be fully under control, but obviously there is a time gap before we get to that point. A time gap where Gregory is the main person in the Pizzaplex. And at the very end of those tapes is when Vanessa is compliant, when she's moved to work at the Pizzaplex, which has already existed for a while now. And it's also worth noting for the poem that there's not super precise punctuation of how you're supposed to read this, so you're just going to have to kind of follow me on this, because I think the punctuation is what makes this such a tricky thing to digest and understand. Break and mend. Tape Girl broke Glitchtrap and Vanessa mended him. She collected all the tapes, which helped to reassemble him. I Built the Breath could be interpreted a lot of ways that all kind of have the same meaning. I built the breath. I introduced the virus to Gregory. I helped Freddy free Burntrap from the depths of the Pizzaplex. I helped set up this whole scheme, etc., etc. You can make built the breath mean almost anything if you try to slang it a certain way. Alright, so a bit of a complete immersion break here for the video. I wrote an entire different section about the zest and jest and poem and all that, and up to this point, it's still been more or less what I think. But at this point, I'm just going to have to completely redo how this was originally meant to go. The original plan was Vanessa was going to be interpreted as the frit and fraught, the scared, confused, and the one lost in thought, whereas Gregory was going to be zest and jest as an energy and excitement. However, I missed a line of dialogue, and because of that, I had to re-examine the entire code kind of from scratch. A lot was mostly the same, but the part that I missed was a single word that completely changes how the code works because, as I said, there's no grammar for the code. It's just the letters. There's not even spaces if you were actually to translate it directly one for one. The difference being, instead of not real, still keen, space, frit and fraught with zest and jest and all that, the correct code would be they hunt now, drawn to life. Not real, still keen, and frit and fraught with thought and zest and jest, no blunt woes. That and for still keen and frit and fraught means we're still describing what is not real and still keen. Considering they hunt now, drawn to life is the subject in this matter, they are what's not real and still keen, which I feel pretty accurately describes Glitchtrap and the animatronics if you look at it from that way. While Glitchtrap has infected all of them, their original personalities do shine through a fair bit throughout the game. The Zest and Jest covers the more energetic half of the cast, characters like Sun, Moon, Monty, Chica, characters who don't seem particularly upset or distressed with anything until they're smashed by the end of the game, which this would obviously be before. However, Frit and Fraught with Thought is characters like Roxy and Monty, who are anxious, frustrated with themselves, angry, lashing out. It also could even describe Glamrock Freddy, who we didn't get a good look at his virus personality, really. We got to see him under the influence of the pure-blooded mimic with the storyteller, and we got to see him ominously follow Tony around in GGY, but how the virus affected him personally is less obvious as it is with the other characters. All of the corrupted versions of the animatronics are unified by one singular trait. They all attack act and work on behalf of Glitchtrap without any remorse or hesitation. No blunt woes. Which is why the next part is the direct follow-up to that description. That first part is describing the origin of the threat, what the threats are and what they're like, and now the request of what to do with them. Once again, this is where it gets kind of tricky because the Pigpen cipher does not have any commas or periods or any punctuation. Even the indents are kind of unreliable with frit and cutting off mid-thing. So you can't even say, oh, it's separated based on how it's spread out across the wall, because it just isn't. You kind of have to take it all as just this one giant text dump and assume where the breaks might be. And the fact that we have to assume is what makes interpreting it tricky. See, most versions I found online reading it out, and why I had to go letter by letter to make sure it was accurate, have the phrase be, try not, do not hold out, hope no, or some variation of that, which grammatically makes no sense. However, if it's like how frit and was broken up weirdly earlier in the poem, we might be able to move the no down a next line, which would fairly drastically change the line to cry not, try not, do not hold out hope, no, your life, your aim will save those with soul, which is an actual grammatically accurate sentence that makes some level of sense. The way to reword that meaning in more normal English than this bizarre-ass poem would be like Vanessa saying, hey, I know the animatronics have thoughts and feelings, but don't cry, don't try to hold out hope for someone else to save you or fix the problem, or that they'll be redeemed and fixed automatically. No, this is on you, you have to do something. Your life, your aim will save those with soul, like me, or yourself, or any of the people that the Glamrocks / other animatronics have attacked or hurt, or whatever have happened over the course of the years in the Pizzaplex. You have to be the one to do something now. The only other way I could see hope no make any sense is if it was a typo, hope not. So the full thing would be cry not, try not, do not hold out, hope not, which becomes a little bizarre as it's so mean and pessimistic sounding relative to the other phrase that it makes it sound like the speaker is actively trying to condemn Gregory doing these actions. So why would the person who wants Gregory to destroy the animatronics, to free people and save people, tell him to not try, give up, and cry and be scared? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Unless this is like Vanny and Vanessa fighting for control over each other, if that makes sense. Like Glitchtrap is inserting this line and then Vanessa's taking back control. Or something weird like that. That's a lot to assume and figure out from this weird, janky code. So rather than assume there's a typo, I'm going to assume there is a simple error where it's formatted in the wrong line. Because there's other weird formatting already proven here, and also that has like an actual narrative meaning rather than contradicting itself midway. Regardless, you can kind of funnel down the code to one basic meaning. A person responsible for some part of the threat that exists now is rooting for Gregory, or someone like him, to destroy the animatronics, who have been corrupted and altered, and by stopping them, you will save those with soul. Now, without going off of huge assumptions, the only person this could really be would be Vanessa. I know Henry and Michael have been thrown around throughout the years, but neither of them, without surviving the fire, would know what a phaser blaster or a phas camera were. Unless they literally thought you were going to shoot and flash them, those lines don't make a whole lot of sense for reacting to the vile band. It also doesn't make much sense in those two contexts because there wasn't really a vile band by the time that Michael and Henry were around. So once again, they would have to survive the fire, so they would absolutely know there is a new corrupted evil band. And also they know who Gregory is, apparently, and went to this room to write this Wallcode, and we never see them elsewhere in the game, really. Like, I know there's some argued hints for Michael being around, but is that really more compelling than the room dedicated to Vanessa and Gregory's tapes being about those two for the Wallcode? Even if you try to chalk in Edwin being the person because he once wrote in a cipher in a different location where he died, and to argue, oh, I Built the Breath is about him creating the mimic, which ends up being responsible for all of this, he has no relation to Gregory Vanessa directly. We have to go off of a ton of assumptions of this character's related to this character somehow in this way that we've never been shown. And also, Edwin's goal isn't exactly to destroy the band. He's not exactly fond of the animatronics and all, but there's a difference between, I don't like these freak you things, and actively destroy them, they are evil, which is a revelation he never really has on page in the original short story he's in. Occam's razor dictates it would be Vanessa. And also, this code loses a lot of weight, in my opinion, when given to someone else. As I said, this story is at its core, up to about Help 1 and 2, about Vanessa's freedom and redemption. If it's not her doing this, then it's a random Wallcode asking Gregory to do these tasks. When it's her, it's a direct request from one trapped prisoner to another to stop their captor. It also means she plays a part in her own freedom rather than just being a bystander who needs to be saved. It is a moment of her strength and will and connection to Gregory that gets her to this point. Doesn't that make more sense for someone who knows him and has an established history with him, and tie really well into the ending of them being in the sunset enjoying ice cream? If it was someone like Michael from the past, or was someone like Edwin, I would really hope there would be a really good explanation for how we get them to this damn room. Though, to think about what this would mean from Gregory's perspective, I think this code is obviously the turning point where he starts working to free himself. There's this very big shift in the tapes between Vanessa being resistant and trying to lock Glitchtrap away in her mind, compartmentalizing him as she said, and I'm needed somewhere else now. Thank you. I wouldn't be surprised if this happened right between those events. As I said, I think Vanessa is somehow locked in or trapped by Princess Quest, and then after that we have Gregory working on his own freedom in the form of Balloon World. That would mean this code would be made sometime right before Princess Quest's creation, which would also explain why he doesn't specifically mention that set of machines. Vanessa shouldn't know about a series of arcade machines she wasn't related to yet. And also this code helps establish what's specifically different about Gregory from another protagonist like Cassie. Back in that FNAF interview, it specifically pointed out how compassionate Cassie is and how that was specifically made to contrast with Gregory, which would tie back to what I was saying previously. Cassie has hope that the animatronics will be changed and fixed and there's still something that can be done, and to an extent she does successfully do that. However, Gregory has no hope for them. He needs to practically do what needs to be done and stop the animatronics that are a threat. Could he maybe find some way to fix the virus and remove them safely and just destroy Glitchtrap outright like in Princess Quest 4? Probably with enough time and setup, but doing that with 4 to 6 killer animatronics and an entire army of staff bots and a killer rabbit lady trying to hunt you down is not going to be very easy, even if you have one of them on your side. That knowledge and that request from Vanessa, I think, is either subconsciously or just outright consciously kept with Gregory throughout the game. Freddy is safe from Gregory's wrath on the account that he is helpful and practical to have around, and also why he is the target to be upgraded more and more, but to successfully save those with Soul, it's also very practical to cave Roxy's skull in with a go-kart, smash Chico with a trash compactor, and watch Monty get Darth Mauled with a steel beam. Gregory is this culmination of basically torture and manipulation reacting back in the most logical way in turn. I know it's very tempting in the world of internet extremes and character analysis to deduce that Gregory is evil and aggressive or something like that, or cold and truly manipulative. And while maybe some of that was always part of his personality, I mean, the Glamrocks retained some of their personality, so I wouldn't be surprised if on some level GGY was part of Gregory's original personality. I mean, Vanessa doesn't seem to be at all violent when she is freed from Glitchtrap's control, and she had no real ill intent with assembling him the first time. She was tricked into it because she thought she was solving a problem, or that she was supposed to find more tapes. The first tape she found literally said, "Find more tapes." If you're a beta tester trying to solve a glitch, then finding more information about the glitch makes sense. And likewise, I don't think of any of Gregory's actions are evil or malicious outside of what he did as GGY under Glitchtrap's control. Yeah, it sucks from our fandom's perspective, because some of us like these Glamrock characters and don't want to see them destroyed, but they're still killer robots at the end of the day. Even dropping Cassie down the well is heavily misinterpreted by the fanbase, I'd argue. I don't think I've ever seen anyone remember or point out accurately that the Mimic copies people's voices, and that could include Cassie, who's been talking through the entire game. I think Gregory realized as Cassie was getting near the elevator, or going up the elevator, that he might have been talking to the Mimic this whole time and played right into its hands. He isn't dropping the elevator because he thinks Cassie getting up there is dangerous or that the Mimic could follow her. He's dropping her because he's afraid it is the Mimic in the elevator that he's talking to. And thus, the safest option is to not let the killer robot get to the surface. Hell, he might even have a chance of breaking it if it's what's in the elevator. It's a gamble he has to take because the other option is death. Is that cold? Yeah, but I think that's where we're going with Gregory as a character. The warm, empathetic one is Cassie, and kind of to an extent Glamrock Freddy. The two that have been through the trenches and understand how dangerous everything is are Gregory and Vanessa. Are there weird details I'm still not 100% certain of? Like what's going on with the Nightmare staff bots, because those still appear in Help Wanted 2, which means they weren't some random detail made up. Is Nightmarionne still a factor in Help Wanted 2, also in the form of this little plushie we can find in Princess Quest 4? Yeah, still don't know what the hell's going on with that one. Am I 100% certain what's going on in the Post-it silo? Variety of things I could think of, but not any one thing I want to push forward as what I think is the case, really. Okay, so I genuinely didn't have any plans for what I think the Nightmare Staffbot silo is, but now, thinking about it more, I do have an idea I want to throw out there, even if I'm not 100% sure on it. What if this room is way simpler than it looks? I mean, it's a room all about the staff bots, so what if that's all that's actually happening here? We know from 46's tapes that the virus took hold and started replicating itself over and over. It created new subroutines and additions and became a proper set of programs and code. This could mean that once the virus entered the Pizzaplex, it wasn't just a simple blanket, oh, you are now all the virus versions of you, but instead that over time the virus took more and more hold and forced more and more sentience upon the robots running the staff locations. We see in Help Wanted 2 that when the staff bots are put under too much stress, something they shouldn't even be able to feel, they turn into the Nightmare staff bots, which are littered everywhere. I think this room is one particularly smart staff bot, or a collection of them over time, hence why there's the different handwriting styles, and the different progression in their levels of intelligence and coherentness, over time becoming more and more sentient and aware. That's why we have the family set up right here. At this point, the virus has fully taken hold, so they're obsessed over Afton and his family, putting it there, knowing that's what a family is supposed to be and what a person is supposed to have, but they're not people. Hence this confusion, frustration, and childish writing everywhere. It explains this weird back and forth personality that you can see across the various post-its, where sometimes they're nice and goofy and silly, and other times they're obsessive and frustrated. This is basically watching a network of robots go completely insane with sentience, ultimately leading to more and more turning into Nightmare staff bots, which litter the room. Like I said, they literally go insane from work, so this is basically a elaborate all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy scene. That also could explain why they put Nightmarionne around the Pizzaplex. For whatever reason, they've latched onto that as their idol. There's a variation of this idea going around called the dead god theory, and that's like they're worshipping that. This is kind of similar to that conceptually, but a little different. I don't know why Nightmarionne is so important. That's part of why I'm still wondering if this is a new character that's being introduced, or like we're going to have Nightmarionne as their own separate antagonist or character. Maybe that will tie into Secret of the Mimic with Jackie over here. That's apparently the name of the character. I'm adding this bit into the video literally as people are going to PAX West and Fantastic. But I thought of this idea in the last hour and wanted to throw it in. But overall, I think we get this painted picture of what I think this new story arc is meant to be. An endoskeleton that copies behavior, maybe made by Edwin. I'm hoping that Secret of the Mimic will confirm it was made by Edwin, or at least confirm who made him 100% so we don't have to argue like, oh, Henry made him, or any stupid debate like that. Regardless, someone makes the Mimic. It gets found by Fazbear Entertainment. There's still something that happens in 1979 we haven't seen yet, with good old
Jackie
over here. Flash forward some time later, we have Fazbear Entertainment returning from the ashes. They use up some of their old assets, such as this random AI they found in the past on old circuit boards, that gets passed on to Silver Parasol working on the VR game. That sort of takes hold on its own and develops this anomalous personality known as Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap starts working on its way to recreate the history of Fazbear Entertainment permanently on loop forever. It gets its subjects Gregory and Vanessa. Gregory infiltrates the pizza place, amongst other stuff that might have happened in the Tales books. Vanessa gets fully controlled by the end of the retro CDs, gets moved over to the Pizzaplex, probably by Gregory hacking the system and information recording to the higher-ups to get her to that position and point. Vanessa, now in a higher position of power, fires as many human employees as she can. Vanessa basically begs Gregory to break free and fight for control. Gregory seemingly succeeds in that by defeating this arcade machine, tries to run for the exit, but then causes Glamrock Freddy to crash mid-performance, ultimately leading Gregory hiding Glamrock Freddy while the crowd disperses and Vanessa looks for him. The two wander around the Pizzaplex trying to find a way out. Gregory learns that he can take upgrades and components from the other animatronics to repair and upgrade Freddy, and then ultimately works on freeing Vanessa via Gregory at the Princess Quest arcade machines and succeeds. Then you have Jeremy, a loyal employee from the past, sticking around in the Pizzaplex trying to fix up what he can, maybe out of some sort of empathy for the characters, maybe because his daughter likes them, or maybe he just cares about them himself. Ultimately finds himself down in the FNAF 6 pizza place and killed by Burntrap. Something happens down there with Burntrap in the Pizzaplex that causes everything to be destroyed and messed up. Maybe the tangle moving around and damaging the sinkhole causing the full collapse. It's kind of unclear why everything's so messed up and decayed. Burntrap retreats even further down into the depths to maybe preserve itself or try to escape damage, or maybe even hide from Gregory and Vanessa, or maybe just, like I said, trying to find a safe place to plot its next course of action now that its two minions are free. And then Jeremy works with Vanessa/Vanny to fully destroy Glitchtrap, causing everything, including Jeremy's Vanny mask, that once had a Glitchtrap AI in it, to be reverted to the Mimic version, creating the unique Mimic version of Helpy, as well as reverting Burntrap to its original personality and identity. Gregory and Vanessa go down there to try and figure out what happened to Burntrap. I think Gregory was down there with the Mimic and then had Vanessa seal him up, probably planning to die himself, knowing how Gregory operates. And maybe the vent collapsed as Gregory tried to escape the Mimic and got lucky. Vanessa just took the forklift with maybe the cement block on it and put it in place to trap the Mimic. And then they installed an upgraded metal door and turned back Mixus on to keep it trapped down there. That, or based on the vent collapsing, the cement door and this powered door were already there, and Gregory just went through the vent and then escaped through the vent as it collapsed. However, him leaving and running from the Mimic is what leaves behind his walkie-talkie, which is how the Mimic interacts with Cassie throughout the game, and somehow sent out a distress call to Cassie as if he was Gregory. I don't know how that part works yet, to be completely honest. Maybe the Mimic and Helpy did it, and that brings us to the events of Ruin, which are pretty self-explanatory. Cassie goes down to the Pizzaplex, helps the animatronics a little bit to the best of her ability, finds everything, undoes the security node, and now the Mimic is free and Cassie's been dropped. I don't know what's going to happen to her now. That's kind of the modern story arc, I think, as a whole. I guess we went a little bit beyond solving security breach and more of the entire new story arc. Obviously, there's going to be stuff that's subject to change that we don't know for sure. But I think this is a pretty good coverage of most of the storyline. So, bye.